Most people will retire broke, not because they never made money, not because they were lazy or reckless, but because somewhere between their first paycheck and their last, they never understood a single quiet truth about how money actually works over time. This video is about one habit, $100 a month, and a mathematical reality that most people live their entire lives never confronting. Stick with this because the number we arrive at by the end of this video will be uncomfortable. And I say that not to alarm you. I say it because if you see it clearly, you may never think about money the same way again. Let's start with a thought experiment. You are 25 years old, fresh out of college, maybe a year or two into your first real job. You are making money. Not a lot, but enough. And someone sits you down and says, give me $100 a month, every month for the next 40 years. And do not touch it. Your gut reaction is probably resistance. $100? That is a car payment. That is groceries for a week. That is 4 or 5 dinners out. That is real money. And handing it over some invisible future feels abstract at best and foolish at worst. So most people do not do it. And that decision, that single, quiet act of avoidance, is where it begins. Here is what actually happens to that $100. When you invest $100 a month into a broad index fund, something that simply tracks the general stock market, and the market returns roughly 10% per year on average, which is a historical average of the S&P 500 going back nearly a century, you do not just end up with $48,000. That would be the math if money did not grow. That would be if you just stuffed it in a mattress. You end up with something closer to $600,000. $600,000. From $100 a month, over 40 years. The person who never started, they have zero. The only difference between those two people is not intelligence. It is not income. It is not even willpower in the traditional sense. It is a start date. Now let us talk about why this works. Because this is where most finance content either bores you sleep or treats you like a toddler. Neither of those things is going to happen here. The mechanism is called compound interest. And I know you have heard that phrase before. You have probably heard it so many times it has lost all meaning. So let's not call it that. Let us call it what it actually is. It is money making money. And then that money making more money. And then that money, the money that the money made, making even more money. The longer it runs, the more absurd it gets. In the first year, your $100 a month earns you maybe $130 in returns. Bare noticeable. The second year, slightly more. The 10th year, you are watching your portfolio grow by more in a single year than you contributed in the previous 5 combined. That acceleration, that curve, is why time is the single most valuable asset you have in finance. Not money, time. And here is where it starts to feel a little cruel. Because the most powerful years, the early ones, the ones between 25 and 35, are precisely the years when everyone is telling you to spend. The economy needs you to spend. The culture expects you to spend. You have just started earning. So why not enjoy it? The car, the apartment upgrade, the subscriptions, the travel, the whole lifestyle infrastructure of being a young professional. None of that is wrong. But all of it has a cost that is invisible on the price tag. A cost measured not in dollars today, but in $40 years from now. Every $100 you do not invest at age 25 costs you roughly $1,700 at age 65. That is not a metaphor. That is the math. So that $200 dinner, call it $3,400. The $5 daily coffee habit, run the numbers, and it is roughly $85,000 over a working lifetime. Not because coffee is evil, but because every dollar has a future identity, and most people never meet it. Now, some of you are watching this and thinking, I am 35 or 40 or 45. Is this already too late for me? No, but the math does change. If you start instead of 25, with the same $100 a month at the same 10% average return, you arrive at retirement with roughly $220,000 instead of $600,000. The decade you waited cost you nearly $400,000. That is the price of delay. Not a fine, not a punishment, just math. If you start at 45, you arrive with around $76,000. Not nothing, but a fraction. And the real tragedy is not the number itself. The tragedy is that the person starting at 45 probably earned more money during their 30s than they ever did in their 20s. They had more to invest. They just did not. Now let's talk about the system, because this is where the habit actually lives. The reason most people fail is not that they lack discipline. It is that they rely on discipline at all. If you wait until the end of the month and invest whatever is left over, here is what will happen. There will be nothing left over. Not because you're irresponsible, but because expenses expand to fill available money. It is a known, documented pattern. Economists have a name for it. Parkinson's law applied to finance. Spending rises to meet income. The people who actually build wealth do not use what is left. They remove the $100 before they can spend it. Automatic transfers set to move on payday to an investment account they do not check every day. The money is never available in their mind. It was already gone. This is sometimes called paying yourself first. I prefer to think of it as engineering your own behavior, not fighting your instincts, bypassing them entirely. The habit does not require motivation. It does not require you to feel financially inspired on a Tuesday morning. It runs whether you remember it or not. That is the design. Now zoom out for a moment. We are talking about $100 a month in the context of personal finance. But this principle scales. It explains why pension funds grow into the billions, why sovereign wealth funds become generational engines of power, why the wealthiest families in the world tend to stay wealthy across generations. They are not smarter. They are just earlier. They started the clock before everyone else. They let time do what time does. And here is the uncomfortable implication at the scale of an entire generation. The people who were told to invest by parents who themselves invested are quietly and automatically building wealth. The people who were not told, who were not shown, who were handed a world of credit cards and no financial education, are not. The gap is growing, not because of effort, not because of talent, because of information access and the age at which the clock started running. That is a structural problem. And $100 a month, as life-changing as the math shows it to be, does not exist in a vacuum. Not everyone has $100 to spare at 25. Not everyone has stability or safety or the kind of income that makes automation possible. The math is sound. The access is not always equal. So where does that leave us? Here is what I keep returning to when I think about this. The habit itself, $100 a month, started as early as possible, automated and ignored, built on boring broad index funds, held through every crash and correction and terrifying headline, produces an outcome that looks, from the outside, like financial genius. It is not genius. It is patience applied with structure. And the real question, the one I do not have a clean answer to, is this. Why is something this simple, this well-documented, this proven over nearly a century of market data, still something that the majority of people never do? Is it the culture of spending? Is it the failure of financial education? Is it the short-term bias built into human psychology, the same bias that makes us take the marshmallow and not wait for two? Or is it something quieter, something almost invisible? Is it that most people, somewhere deep down, do not actually believe the future is real enough to save for? I do not know, but I think it is worth sitting with, because the math is already done. The answer is already there. The only variable left is whether you decide that the version of you, 40 years from now, is worth $100 today